Oh, we're doing good time.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, I think we're live now.
Sweet.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. This is Radio Sheridan, live from the historic Rogers Park neighborhood in Chicago. This is a show about whatever the hell we feel like. And as usual, we have
Charles.
and yours truly, William. Okay. I believe, Charlie, you have the quote of the day, so you can go ahead and read that out.
It's the art of politics is knowing what to do next.
Ah.
And it's by James P. Cannon, who was he was a labor leader in the 1920s. He did a lot of work with, he was just heavily involved in the labor movement.
Okay, that's cool.
Tennessee.
Cool. Yeah, was he like a syndicalist, would you say?
Yeah, he was one of the founding members of the Communist Party, USA. But then he was kicked out because he supported Trotsky.
I see.
And was critical of Stalin.
Speaking of being critical of Stalin, I understand you left the Socialist Party recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why exactly did you leave?
Because it's not revolutionary. It's my idea going into it was it would be this like radical, like revolutionary, like organization, but it's not. It's just a cult, a sect that doesn't have any real leadership. And
what would you say are their main goals at this point? Like at least the city level?
It all depends on the local. There's no kind of leadership on the national level.
Huh, interesting.
So the locals are left to do what the fuck they want. And
okay.
It's
and you felt that Chicago local wasn't doing enough?
No, like I clashed with them because the stuff I mentioned many times, like why don't we feed the homeless? Why don't we, instead of protesting very specific things, why don't we go out there and do stuff, help people, like feed the poor and like stuff like that, do revolutionary stuff.
Yeah, and that would actually help the community and get your name out.
Help the community.
And make people aware that the Socialist Party of Chicago exists.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's
like,
nothing.
It doesn't seem like, because I never hear about like that and actually like running things or doing like community outreach or anything of that nature. So it seems like they're just like on their own, just in a big circle jerk.
Yeah, the whole party is just a cult. To like, yeah, the Soviet Union was great. Let's bring it back.
Okay.
Like,
wow.
It's not revolutionary. It's not going to inspire the kind of radical change that it wants to. It's stuck in the past, essentially.
Okay. Huh. All right. Yeah. So I guess in local news on Tuesday, the runoff election will happen. I think it's been since I think the last time we were on was right before the general election. So, and for anybody who is unfamiliar with that, the top two people in the general election last month were Tony Preckwinkle and Lori Lightfoot. And since neither of them got more than 50% of the vote, there's going to be a runoff on Tuesday between them. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. I believe Lori Lightfoot, as far as I know, has like a very slight lead in the polls. I think a lot of people are turned off of Preckwinkle because she was responsible for the soda tax.
Oh.
So that's like I think why a lot of people are sort of wary of having her as mayor. They're worried about more things like that. I saw people on Facebook calling her Tax Winkle. That's her name. Yeah. So it's just like some people seem to be very against her. Although the Chicago Teachers Union endorses her.
Oh.
She used to. She used to be a teacher.
Right.
In CPS. So I'm not really sure like who forms like much of her base at this point. I mean, I don't think with Chicago mayor, I don't think like either candidate really is having like a massive amount of support. It's just like people who like see whoever they're voting for as a lesser of two evils anyways. So, yeah. And time will tell as to whether either of them are willing to stamp out corruption in Chicago. Right. But are they willing to like go against the machine to any?
At the end of the day, I don't see either candidate doing something that's gonna like actually change the situation. I don't think either of them are going to do something that's going to attack or change institutional racism, or the fact that if you go in certain neighborhoods of the south side of Chicago, that the poorest of the poor, they're not going to be helped.
No.
They've always, if you're poor and black and you're in a neighborhood where there's nothing, public school sucks.
Nobody has the there's no incentive to invest in those neighborhoods.
Right. Nobody gave a shit about you.
Yeah.
Like in the past, and nobody's going to give a shit about you now. That's just how the system is.
Yeah. I mean, when white flight happened in those neighborhoods in the 60s and 70s, and, the middle class left those neighborhoods, as well as the factory jobs that, decreased by the hundreds of thousands during that time, that's when those neighborhoods became so destitute.
Right.
So, yeah, there just isn't... If there was opportunity in those areas, then you wouldn't see a lot of the problems that you see now. But that opportunity just isn't there for a lot of parts of the city.
I was looking on Google Earth. I just looked up Englewood, and if you just go through it, you'll see a lot of lawns are overgrown, a lot of buildings are abandoned,
a lot of vacant lots.
It's kind of like Gary. It's scabbing up, but it's still desolate.
Yeah.
There's just nothing there.
Mm-hmm. There's a picture of the intersection, I think it's 63rd and Halstead, and it's like a side-by-side image of the 1950s versus today. Let's see if I can find it. This is what Englewood used to look like back in the 50s.
Wow.
Yeah, it's completely built up, lots of neon signs,
streetcars.
Yeah, streetcars, buses, all that. And now it's that same corner, there's almost nothing there. Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, I don't see, like you said, I don't see either candidate being able to address that. If it were to happen, unfortunately, I think really the only thing that would ever drive that sort of massive reinvestment that those areas need is gentrification.
Yeah.
I don't think that would really happen, because a lot of the middle class, young whites, I don't think are going to move to that neighborhood. In the same sense that a lot of them are moving to Logan Square or something.
Right.
Because
I mean, those neighborhoods in Chicago that are just so desolate, and if you look at other cities too, like Detroit, Gary, Flint, Michigan, it's a symptom of a greater issue in this country, that there are parts of cities that are decaying.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain, and that's symptomatic of a deeper issue that nobody's talking about.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with the fact that over the course of, I'd say since the 70s, over the course of 50 years, just the massive decrease in investment in the American citizen, I guess whether it is more government spending in education to decrease the cost of college, the deindustrialization of this country, it's an issue of its decay, and it's a very difficult situation to address, because once something starts decaying, it's very hard to reverse it.
Yeah.
Because the answer, it's easy to deindustrialize, but you can't bring that back.
No, you can't.
You can't bring something back that's going to provide massive amounts of jobs.
Yeah, because those same jobs there's jobs that don't exist in cities anymore. You don't see there are still industrial parks in Chicago. If you go down McKinley Park, there are still factories around there, and there is still a sizable working class in that area. But when those, if those factories were to close down, then you would see what happened in Englewood. You would see a massive amount of disinvestment in those neighborhoods. You would see probably an uptick in crime, because there's really no where's the opportunity?
Right.
That's why there's so much crime in those areas, because there's no opportunity.
Right.
It has nothing.
There's nothing to do except to.
Yeah. There's if if people in those, if there were, good paying jobs in those areas, you wouldn't see people turn to organized crime or
Right.
gangs, because, they wouldn't have, that wouldn't be the only source of of any sort of opportunity or income in those places. So, yeah.
It's a complex issue that it's always been there, but the fact that it's a national trend and just that kind of decay on the national level, it's concerning, and it's bigger than Trump. It's bigger than Democrat or Republican. It's reevaluating our political system and saying that collectively as Americans, do we want to be ahead, be the most technologically advanced country in the world? Do we want to go to Mars? Do we want to do all these advanced things? Or do we want to take a step back and realize, like, whoa, even the moon landings, a lot of leaders in the civil rights movement clashed with people in government. The civil rights leaders clashed with the Kennedys because civil rights, the poor.
Yeah, like why are we spending all this money to go to space when there's so much poverty in this country?
Yeah, and people like Elon Musk, who wants to go to Mars, he'd be so much useful to society and be better for society if he spent his money. The amount of money he is spending on trying to go to Mars, he could virtually eradicate poverty in Chicago if he spent as much money. And it's just that kind of collective identity.
Not to mention, for the first time in history, there are two centibillionaires in the country. Both Elon Musk not Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates are worth over $100 billion. Yeah, and that's like money that they could give away 99.9% of their income, and they could still they wouldn't feel a squeeze.
Oh.
I know that I know Bill Gates is in a pact with Warren Buffett that they plan to give away like most of their wealth by the time they die to charitable organizations, which is a good thing. But that's almost like a token gesture,
right?
Yeah. So
it's confronting that reality, and I think it's summed up by, say, the anger of Trump voters, is that kind of ethos in the working class ethos in this country is that in the past, when we were industrialized and workers were organized with labor unions, they were militant, they
were willing to go out in the streets and get arrested
and
get fire hoses.
There was an understanding that the greatness of a country is not how well the individual is doing, it's how well we as a people collectively are doing.
Yeah.
And in the Constitution, it doesn't mention businesses, it doesn't mention political parties, it doesn't mention that, like, businesses are people.
Yeah. George Washington was opposed
to people.
Yeah, George Washington was opposed to political parties developing because he predicted that factionalism would arise in the country, and that the parties would only serve their own interests and not better the country itself. And you mentioned that there was this militancy in the early labor movement, and I don't see that ever coming back in culture, because like people are so worried that if they go out and if they go out and protest, then they wouldn't be able to work and they might lose their job. And like that sort of fear is what's keeping a larger labor movement from existing.
Yeah.
People just aren't willing to take that personal risk, even though some of them may understand that there needs to be change, but they don't want to be the one to put themselves on the line to go out for that change.
And it also shows that a lot of the more traditional groups, like the Socialist Party or Communist Party, it shows that the kind of like revolutionary, I guess, leftism in those realms of those factions is always defined by Marxism and what has happened in the 20th century. That Karl Marx's critique of capitalism is valuable. It's valuable today to understand the system of power that exists in a capitalist economy.
Yeah.
That's how Marx is helpful. But the interpretations of the 20th century are not accurate and won't really lead anywhere. That the kind of belief that a lot of people on the left still believe is that, oh, if we arm ourselves, if we go back to the militancy of the Soviet Union, and if we follow what Lenin did, it doesn't work, because our governments today are just so much more fragile than they were, and that if we want to make change for the good and make it permanent, it can't automatically be violence every time.
Yeah.
It has to be,
because when you have the violence and when you overthrow governments, that will create a power vacuum.
right.
And in that power vacuum could create something that's even more totalitarian.
Right.
And, yeah.
And I guess it's the interpretation that Marxism, critical theory, it's revolutionary, but violence is not always necessary to be a revolution. You can still be compassionate and loving and be a revolutionary.
Yeah, because that, in a sense, I think Paulo Freire wrote about that, who was also a Marxist. He says that can be like, that compassion can be a revolutionary act in itself. Yeah. So, and it's like you were saying earlier with the Socialist Party of Chicago. As you're saying, like, they should be the ones to do that outreach, to show compassion to the city, and to be able to push for that radical change through how they interact with the people in their community, as opposed to just like,
do what Lenin did, and
Yeah, because there can be change. Change can exist without, lasting change can exist without violence.
Right.
If the people who are campaigning for that change are willing to do the necessary things to make it lasting.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's being a compassionate warrior, a loving warrior, is more appealing than, I guess, in a sense, it in our political system, Bernie comes closest to it, because in the sense of American politics, he's radical, but he's compassionate.
Yeah.
He's not,
because he understands the reality that a lot of Americans face.
He's a compassionate revolutionary. He's not an authoritarian like Trump is.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, we can talk, I guess, a little bit about how a lot more people have entered the race in the last month. It's the election is something like more than a year and a half away. So I'm sure a lot of them are going to drop out in the next month before the debates start. Because I remember in 2016, the Republican debates had 14 people on stage to start off with, something like that. And whereas I think even the largest Democratic debate had 5, the very first one, and then by the end, I think one of them had 3, and then just 2 at the end. So it's 10 now, I think. How many? Yeah, we'll look that up. How many Democrats are running currently? Let's see. Democrats.
There's people that should not be running that are going to take away from the truly progressive candidates. Beto is not progressive, and he's going to sap away a lot of support from.
Yeah. Let's see. All right, so I'm just going to count. See, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know why she's
6,
running.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there's 15 that are officially running, and there's, let me see how many exploratory committees, and then there's a few, I think 1 or 2 have exploratory committees at this point, so that's a lot. What do you think about Andrew Yang?
He should drop out. He's just another random person that is only gonna make the process harder for the true progressives. Yeah.
Well, the universal basic income thing he's pushing is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see whether that's tilts more people in his favor.
I'm My only thing with universal basic income is that it can turn. It branches on the category of becoming a welfare state, which I'm not a fan of. I do not like that.
Yeah, and like what I'm concerned about is that it could result in inflation.
Right.
Yeah, if you give everybody $1,000, then it's like, they have that money, but how much is everything else going to cost as a result?
And it's. I mean, Karl Marx wrote about welfare states. That it's not stepping away from capitalism. It's a reform to instill capitalism further.
Yeah,
in its place.
because it creates dependency.
Right.
Yeah. And I have to wonder like why Beto's running, because like he couldn't even beat Ted Cruz, who's like one of the most unpopular politicians in Texas.
He doesn't have enough experience.
He doesn't have the experience. He doesn't there's no way of telling how successful he's going to be, because the Democrats, like the goal for the Democrats, they need to basically pick the best candidate to beat Trump, and Beto is not going to, doesn't seem like the guy to do that.
Trump will bully him into
like we get to think like who's like going to be the best candidate that like cannot be bullied by Trump, and probably I would say it's Bernie.
Yeah.
Because he has like a strong enough cadre of followers that like understand that that Trump is a bully, and like they aren't going to back down just because Trump's talking about him.
And he's well known.
He's well known. He has he's like stuck to his principles his whole career. Like if you like, there's a picture of like a ad that he ran when he was running for, I think, Senate back in the 70s, and it's like the exact same stuff he's talking about today. Yeah, like, he even like refers to the minimum wage as a starvation wage. He still uses that same term today.
The compassionate love warrior, that's what he is.
Yeah. And there's like every so often I'll see on Facebook a video of him talking about nuclear proliferation in like the 80s and 90s, and talking about the how like they shouldn't enter the Iraq war after 9/11. Like he was saying that like Saddam Hussein is an evil dictator, but that's none of our business, and we shouldn't enter into this war for that. Yeah. What do you think of Kamala Harris?
She's in part of the establishment.
Yeah.
She's not going to win.
Yeah, and
we're past that. The young people don't want that era, that Clintonite era of politics anymore.
She was also pro-ICE. She was like in favor of reporting undocumented juveniles to ICE. So, and that's like not really something that a lot of
young people don't like that.
No, they don't. They more young people. Well, I don't know. Like I don't really have any statistics to back this up, but based on what I see, it seems like more young people want to abolish ICE than anything else.
ICE is relatively new.
It is. Yeah, it was established after 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean before that it was INS, Immigration Naturalization Services.
Right.
So
why still keep it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that occurred after 9/11 that shouldn't be existing, like the TSA.
Patriot Act.
Patriot Act, yeah. And didn't Hillary Clinton vote for the Patriot Act?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good that she says she's not running, though, because could you imagine if she ran again?
Oh.
That would just and she would probably be the DNC's favorite again, despite what a lot of members of the party want.
Right.
Yeah.
What else? Biden is thinking of running, but I read something the other day is that he's been accused of like touching people inappropriately.
That doesn't surprise me. If you just look at all the pictures of him like being very like overly intimate with like young girls, even that really wouldn't surprise me. I mean, maybe it's just like his own like personality that he like is a very touchy-feely guy, but like that's really one of the big reasons I hope he doesn't run, because like can you imagine like that's so much ammo to Trump, like I can imagine like Trump would just be calling him Creepy Joe Biden. That would be his nickname, Creepy Joe Biden. So
Yep.
I mean, he was like not even that like much of a progressive anyway. Like if you look at his stuff from like the 90s, like he was even saying like he was pro wall, I believe, wasn't he?
Really?
I think he was back then like Biden pro.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Is he like one of those conservative Democrats?
I don't know like whether he's that conservative. He said like it says Biden back when he was a senator was in favor of the Secure Fence Act, which like funded 700 miles of fence along the Mexican border. Yeah, and but although like on other things on immigration, like he supported immigration reform, and providing Social Security and a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. So I guess that's like a pro thing of him on immigration.
Well, I mean, that as stressful as 2020 will be, with the internet, you can look up any candidate and find dirt on them.
Yeah.
And you can tell like if they're either running bullshit or not.
Yeah.
And, you know, finding a candidate that people will support and look for is difficult. And it's really frustrating for people who are just like, who cares about that stuff? We just want a candidate running who can beat Trump. But more stuff matters. If we're going to elect someone, it has to be someone that is honest and is not full of shit.
Yeah.
The fact that we have the internet and you can look people up only makes it also shows why a lot of people opt out of voting, because politicians in general are dirtbags. That like politics, it attracts a certain type of personality of people that are not always the most honest and like faithful, and very few stick to like ideals and what they have always said.
Yeah.
And that only gives more power to the voters and frustrates the people in the establishment more, because it balances out power, because it gives a voter the right to say like, we're not going to support your candidate if they did this in the past.
Yeah. And and also, and that's contributes to the rise of populism, which I think the DNC doesn't understand that, like, with Trump in the political sphere, a populist, well, they'll have to find a populist to beat him, because like you can't like with Trump, it's not really politics as usual, because like if they pick somebody who's like very like milquetoast, who's very like just a standard, talking head, that's not going to do it. They're not. They need somebody that's charismatic. They need somebody that's willing to call Trump out on certain things. They need somebody like they need somebody similar to an Ocasio-Cortez, who's like is very outspoken and can get that sort of following, especially with young voters. That's the Democrats are going to need.
Like, people want a passionate leader.
Yeah. People want a passionate leader because they understand that, like, I mean, even if you look at Republicans that support Trump, they support Trump because he's willing to say what's on his mind, because he's not just like a Bush he's not like a Bush or like a McCain or somebody that's like just like towing the party line on everything. So they want somebody who wants to bring like new ideas and new leadership, or new styles of leadership and new ways of presenting themselves to the public. And that's why that's like a big part of why it's so popular.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Oh yeah, and I guess we could talk a little bit about the Mueller report.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How
I wasn't surprised it didn't find anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It did not recommend. Yeah. It didn't recommend Trump be arrested on Russian collusion.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if Mueller found something, that would be the easy way out to get rid of Trump. But I never thought that Mueller would find anything in the first place.
Yeah.
That if we want to get rid of him, he has to be voted out.
Yeah. Or like brought up on state charges or something, which, and who knows how long that's going to take and whether that's even going to result in anything happening to him. Yeah, I mean, it's he's, in the end, I think you're right, he's going to have to be voted out.
Yeah.
Although I do think that the full report should be released.
Right.
Because like it's very likely it's like over 300 pages long. And there's only like a 4-page summary of it that's been released so far.
We could do a whole episode about it, just go through it.
Yeah, if it is ever released, we can just go through it point by point and talk about that. It seems interesting that like the Attorney General William Barr actually released a summary, despite the fact like he released it like only like a day or two after, so he couldn't have read the whole thing. No. He couldn't have, like, you can't read like a 300-page document, especially with all probably the appendices that it has.
Right.
And who knows like how much documentation that is. I mean, that could be like 1,000 pages. I mean, depending on how much information is listed in there.
Right.
So, who knows? Yeah, I don't think. Although, like, do you think that they are actually going to release it? Do you think it's likely that the
I'm
full
not
report.
certain. I would be less surprised if they released it, but with redactions.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's a lot of sensitive information in there that would need to be redacted anyway, like certain people and places that would need to, just for security reasons, not be included in the report.
But I mean, I always suspected Mueller wouldn't find anything, and at this point, I don't really care about it, and I feel like it's an issue Democrats need to drop, and they have to focus on policy for 2020.
Yeah.
They just can't keep talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another like really big thing in the news that happened in the time since we've done the show was the shooting in New Zealand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I mean, it's interesting. Like less than a week after that, the Prime Minister of New Zealand said, that we need to start banning guns.
Right.
But
immediately.
Immediately.
Action was taken.
Yeah.
If only America could be that quick.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no way that, because there's just no way that would happen in America. Like they're like people, like the same like excuses would be given, like this is too soon to talk about it, and it shows that there's still it shows that this sort of alt-right like Islamophobia is not limited to the United States. It's a global phenomenon.
That I forget what it's called. It's something terrorism,
stochastic terrorism.
Yeah, stochastic terrorism. I was looking that up, and how a lot of these alt-right people are radicalized with that.
Yeah.
That you have all these forums online of these hard, like radical right pages on Reddit or other places that like these white men find and just get entranced by.
Yeah, although I don't really think you can say that you can be radicalized through the internet, because I do think you have to have some sort of you have to have like those beliefs to begin with. I mean, where they become stronger because of the exposure is one thing, but like if I were to start like browsing those websites in depth, like I know that I wouldn't become radicalized because I don't have those sort of views to begin with.
And you're exposed to other stuff.
Yeah, exposed to other stuff.
You're in a city.
Yeah, you're in a city, and if I were to browse those things, I would be browsing it because I would know I was an outsider. Like I wouldn't be looking to become radicalized because of it. And and you brought up stochastic terrorism, and you see like there is, I think, a worrying trend in governments around the world to like be sort of a lot of politicians on the right want to be figureheads of opposing immigration,
right?
And they wanted they're pushing the white genocide conspiracy theory. They think that they're like trying to press this supposed issue that all like immigration is replacement immigration. It's like if you allow like people from different races or religions in your country, they will replace you. Or so that's like, I think that's like what a lot of people on the right are afraid of. They buy into this theory, and that's what is driving a lot of the hatred.
And that assumption that somehow the current people living are going to be replaced it's such bullshit, because cultures are dynamic.
Yeah,
they're
dynamic to begin with.
They're fluid. They don't stay static, and that just plays to how race is just it's such, for humans to do that to people of different color, it's such a human thing to do, because if you look at other animals, they don't give a fuck about, like dogs, different dog breeds, they don't care.
Yeah, they don't like isolate themselves.
No. That's just and I mean, like 2 points. The fact that U.S. law enforcement is behind in studying these like right-wing groups is surprising. Not really surprising. That especially in this country, being a white supremacist is more socially acceptable than saying being a communist.
Because you have like this idea of like free speech. Like people have the idea that like, we disagree with his opinion, but they still have the free speech. They have the right to say it. Whereas people like you don't really hear that defense a lot when you're talking about communism or socialism.
And if you go to Europe, communism and socialism people aren't like frightened by it.
Yeah, it's a mainstream, like there are
Yeah.
mainstream parties that are openly socialist and
Yeah.
revolutionary.
And they have seats in parliament.
Yeah.
Like France has a communist party. They have members in parliament. Germany does. Like it's just, yeah, America has this issue that a lot of these like right wing it's just a lot of misinformation and just general nativism.
Yeah.
When you boil it down.
Yeah, and the misinformation is a big part of it too. And you're right about that, because they're like people seem to have this stereotypes of like, you know, of these outsiders that would like cause like that would like bring crime. Right. Even like when Trump announced his campaign, like he was saying that like Mexico was like sending rapists and
that's stochastic terrorism.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, like, you know, it's like you're just on the cusp of like, you're not going over the line of calling for hatred or violence, but you're implanting those ideas into people's minds.
Right.
That, you know, that they are, you know, that they're not willing to assimilate. Like you're in doing that, you almost convince people that there's no that there isn't a way that they would be able to assimilate to the country, that they wouldn't be able to that they, you know, are only associated with crime, when you're, you know, that in itself is a stereotype. But the way it's being sold is that's being sold to people that live in very like white areas of the country, very rural areas, and since they don't have the experience with living in a really multicultural area, they take that as fact.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of it is, I mean, race, and like that conversation is just not, it hasn't been had nationally.
No, it hasn't.
That in the context of the civil rights movement, JFK was kind of tone deaf to it. Like the Kennedys were more worried. He grew up.
I think the reason why he was tone deaf is because he like he grew up in a very wealthy, very like upper crust family.
And it wasn't until the Freedom Ride bombings that he was really pushed on edge to use federal troops to go on those buses and start protecting the civil rights volunteers.
Yeah, and he got shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's basically, you know, how that ended for him. Yeah, I have to wonder, you know, that whole family, like it seems that whole family has like very untimely deaths.
Yeah.
It's what is it about the Kennedys that like results in their either getting shot or just dying of overdoses, or I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
People have written books about it.
They have, yeah. People have made movies about it.
Yeah.
I mean, have you seen JFK, the Oliver Stone movie?
Parts of it.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's interesting. I mean, I understand like a lot of people consider like, you know, giving credence like conspiracy theories about JFK, but it's interesting that he's telling the stories in the way he does.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could also talk about the college scandals.
Oh yeah.
Laura Loughlin.
Laura Loughlin. Like, what is, because I understand, like, is it because like she is like bribing universities to admit her her children, or what exactly is that?
It was her and a bunch of other wealthy parents bribed. One key player was this coach. I think it was this sports coach, and basically they bribed him, gave him money, and to get their kids into these Ivy League schools like MIT and Harvard, they would get a ride. They would get into it via sports scholarship, and so pictures would be made of the child playing a sport, and just all this effort went into getting their kids into these universities. They paid to have someone go and take their SAT for them.
Yeah.
Like,
you know, I've heard rumors that Daley did that for law school. Like he couldn't pass the bar exam, so he paid somebody else. There's only rumors though, because like he failed it like 2 or 3 times. Oh. Yeah.
And how, yeah, it's just like, it's mind-boggling. Laura Loughlin's daughter, who has a YouTube channel, like multiple times she'll have videos where she's like, yeah, I'm not really into college thing. I'm more about parties and stuff like that. It's like, why are you there?
Yeah.
Get the fuck out.
And why are you admitting this on like such a public forum?
You go to school to study and
Yeah.
do well, not fucking party.
Yeah.
You're taking up someone's spot who's actually going to do the work.
Yeah,
shit.
exactly. Like you're somebody that actually will be there to study, and you're not even like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like why even? That's ridiculous.
But it's not surprising.
Yeah, I mean,
know,
I'm sure like that's been happening for a long
Yeah.
time. Just nobody's really been talking about it.
Legacies. That's what they are.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's privilege. You know, the rich buying their kids' way into school.
Right.
You know, if they're not bribing the college official, they'll donate money for a new library. And like, hey, their kid got in.
Huh.
What do you know? Like,
Yeah. That's weird. Oh yeah, you know, there's this study that came out. It's from the General Social Survey. Apparently, there's the percentage of U.S. adults reporting no sex in the past year reached an all-time high last year because 23%, I guess 23% of adults didn't have sex last year.
what? U.S. adults?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that lower or higher than normal?
That's been higher than normal. Apparently, that's I guess that's like a 3-decade. I guess like it's been like going in that trend for the past few decades because like there's a lot of older people like as they get older they stop having sex, and there's like a lot of younger people that don't have mates or anything.
Oh.
Apparently, a much larger expected number of them were men in their 20s.
Okay.
That's interesting.
I could see how the internet could fuck that up.
Yeah, because of
How-
incel culture,
Right.
especially.
But it's not that hard to be in a relationship. You just be nice.
Yeah, I guess
To-
that's true.
It's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, even the terminology a lot of people use, like the friend zone,
Yeah.
that can be kind of that's a misogynist
It is.
way, because that's configuring that it's that somehow if a man has been friends with a woman a long time, that automatically that men are they have the rights to
They feel they're entitled to a
they're
relationship.
entitled to more than just a friendship after a certain amount of time, and that's not always the case. That
Right.
if a woman is nice to you, it doesn't mean she's flirting with you. It just means she's a nice person, and that in general people should be nice to each other. That doesn't mean they
Yeah, that
wanna
doesn't
fuck
mean
you.
doesn't mean that the niceness has to be reciprocated with sex.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think like some men are very they feel entitled.
Right.
They feel entitled to that.
And like men are socialized in this country to be stoic and view women as objects.
Right. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they feel they're entitled to. They feel that's they feel that's their own goal around women should be to have sex, when really that's not how it should be. It should be to cultivate a friendship and something more meaningful than just having
a partnership.
A partnership, yeah. I mean, even if you you are in a relationship with somebody, the cornerstone of the relationship doesn't necessarily have to be sex.
Right.
Right. It should be on developing, I'm basically on developing like a life partnership, like you said. I mean, even if like you're just like friends with a woman, like that, like the end goal shouldn't be just to have sex with them. And to do that is like it's misogynistic to even do that.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to a relationship than that.
Still, that's like 20% of how many men in this country.
Yeah. Well, it's 23% of adults in general.
Oh.
So yeah, and it's like like another reason is like a lot of times like especially because like a lot of younger men in their 20s are either living alone or living with their parents. So like under those circumstances, a lot of times there's just going to be less sex to begin with because you're not living with their partner.
Part of it too is women want to get a degree and not become women in general want Like my girlfriend Andrea, before she ever has kids, wants to finish getting her degrees and become financially stable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's an understanding we have. And I would rather wait to have kids till I'm 30 instead of rushing into it.
Yeah. I mean, there's really not much good that can come with rushing into something like that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I understand. I can sort of understand like why a lot of young people aren't in a rush to have kids on for financial reasons, but because like a lot of them like they want to have careers, they want to experience like life as a young adult entering adulthood without that added commitment of having kids. So I understand that like that definitely is not something that a lot of people want to do. Also, I've heard a theory that like just going back to like why people aren't having sex. I've heard a theory that like social media plays a role in that. Like the more like there's becoming this like larger group of people that are having like the group of people that's like finding relationships is becoming smaller because like on Tinder like on an app like Tinder, for example, only like the most attractive people are connecting and hooking up, whereas like the rest of the population just is having a lot more difficult time. And like that, the part that's like, because like Tinder makes it so easy to find somebody who's like very attractive, somebody's like a perfect match for you, that like those like that group of people that are like perfectly matched is becoming smaller and smaller, where those other groups can't have as many people. And
I mean, the thing with I wouldn't call Tinder a dating site. I have personal beliefs. No, it's not. It's not a dating app. It's just a hookup to have sex. But if you want a deep, rich relationship, it's very difficult to replicate that organically on a website, because the issue with Tinder and a lot of them is that you're sexualized based on looks. And all these different, like, input your favorite things, your favorite movies, is that people are more than just some profile.
Yeah, people are more than just their interests or how they look.
Yeah.
And then like it's a very much a superficial way of looking at things if you just go based on what you list. And even on like an app like Tinder, you're putting your best self forward.
Yeah.
You're putting you're putting yourself out there and you're trying to make yourself look good when really nobody's perfect. And like you don't really understand how perfect or imperfect somebody is unless you meet them in person.
And it's just, I mean, that the internet's great because it connects everyone together, but at the same time, I feel like our generation has taken it for granted that it can also be it can be a crutch in a way where you lose that natural sense of social behavior and connection with another human being.
Yeah, and people, I guess, would argue that it's like still social interaction, but it takes another form. Like people like use social media to like organize things where they interact with people in real life, but there's a balance that needs to occur. There needs to be a balance of like being around people in real life and having like that sort of whatever degree you have in on like interactions online. There needs to be some sort of in-person interaction to counterbalance that, because like if you limit yourself to just like talking with people online, I don't really think that's going to be like mentally healthy for you. No. You need to be able to interact with people in the real world as well. I mean, it's two different skill sets, I think. Like there's ways to conduct yourself online that you wouldn't necessarily do in real life, and vice versa. There's definitely, I think, different skill sets, like social skill sets, that exist in those two separate areas of communication.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, like, even like now, like as we're doing the show, like, we're talking, this is like an in-person thing, but it's also being put online, which is interesting because like, it's, and if I was to like if like the only interaction I had with people was listening to them on podcasts, like that's different than like going to like a coffee house or just like talking with them. That's like completely a different thing, because I feel like in so many senses there's, I think, sort of this sort of subconscious anonymity that people have when they're online, even if they're using their real name, their real identity, because they're not like in front of somebody in person.
Right.
I think there's like some people, I think, like have this sort of subconscious idea that they are that they're just online, so it's like a separate thing, it's a separate way of communicating.
They tend to exaggerate.
They tend to exaggerate, and they tend to say things that they wouldn't necessarily say if they were in person. I mean, just getting back to like the like we were talking about the shooting in New Zealand and how like people can become radicalized online. Like people use those websites online to sort of say things that they wouldn't necessarily say in person.
That after that shooting, there's a Reddit page dedicated to socialism. I take it with a very small grain of salt, but occasionally someone will post stuff that's really like something to look into. One of them was someone posted I think it was like a Trump related Reddit page that someone screen snapped this photo of everyone kind of talking about like, oh yeah, like people should keep doing these mass shootings because of white genocide. The Muslims are coming to kill us and like take over the white race, and just all this paraphernalia of this like right wing like made up bullshit of white genocide, and people posting that saying, oh, like, look at this, they don't ever talk about this in the news, like they committed genocide against Christians in Africa. And that
just because that happened doesn't mean that the other one is less legitimate. You know? It's like people that are Holocaust deniers say, what about the Ukrainian genocide? What about that? And I said, yeah, that's important as well, but that doesn't mean that the Holocaust is less legitimate.
And I think part of it is if you want to like really chip at the power these right-wing people have, you're gonna eventually need to regulate the internet. If you want to cut off a main artery of their power, you have to regulate it in a way where people can't go underground and find these sites so easily as they used to.
Yeah, but I think there needs to be sort of a balance with any regulation that occurs, or else you'll have something like Article 13 in the EU, which is like something like clamps down on copyrighted things like that. Like there's like, it's interesting because the internet really is sort of, I think, like the last like Wild West frontier of communication, and there is, I think, something important to maintaining that. But and you're right when you say that there should be like there should be some sort of limitation to how people can become radicalized, but I'm not sure like how to do that while still maintaining sort of the free like communication, the free like boundaries of the internet. So that's going to be that's kind of a sort of a difficult thing to do there,
because it's incredibly difficult to define what hate speech is.
And it's in a lot of contexts it's difficult to determine how to combat it and how to limit it. And also, I believe it came out, I think, yesterday that Facebook is starting to delete white nationalist pages. Like you think that would have happened already, but yeah. And like the way people are criticizing it is that like if you close those down, you'll have to start closing down socialist sites too. They like sort of, a lot of people are criticizing this, start to develop this false equivalency that like these openly hateful and violent websites should be compared to something like socialism. And I mean there are like like all free, like hate speech has been, I think, defined in some senses. Like there are federal laws saying you cannot like openly call for violence, but and people are
that in itself is just so it's just so nuanced, because with the stochastic terrorism, what Trump is doing, that's you can kind of define that as hate speech. Because it's
being endorsed by the president.
Even though you're not physically saying go lynch Mexicans or black people. What Trump says by, like, I guess, being derogatory and using slurs against a group of people, he's not saying it directly, but it influences it.
It influences it, and it legitimizes it in people's eyes. They say, like, you know, and it's like, that's I think why you see like such an uptick in hate speech and hate crimes is because people feel emboldened to do it now that the president is openly saying it.
Yeah.
So you have people that are like willing to say things that perhaps 10 years ago were still politically incorrect to say, and were still looked down upon by society. But now people are there are some people that see what the president is saying and sort of rationalize it that way, that they can say it. They feel that they can say it now. They don't feel that they'll be socially ostracized for doing so when they should be.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of I don't know how good this analogy is, but in A Streetcar Named Desire, the main character, Blanche, how she represents the old South and Southern ways, and how what's the main? Damn it! What's
Stanley?
Yeah, Stanley. How Stanley represents the Industrial Revolution, and throughout the play, it's a metaphor for how the Industrial Revolution kind of just steamrolled through the old South and broke down that old traditional society. And I guess the same could be said about the internet, that the internet is this new thing that is just, as time progresses, it will continue to break down the norms we have for each other. And it's going to
continue to integrate itself into social interactions and how people view things in society. Because 20, 30 years ago, nobody could have predicted how like ingrained like cell phones would be in our society. Like nobody could have predicted that our whole, in a sense, like our lives almost completely revolve around phones in some way, and like just the ability of like the amount of communication that we do through phones and the internet, like that, like, and also the amount of information that we take in. Like it's like in previous generations, like there was like the amount of information. I read this somewhere once. So like the amount of information like created per day is like the same amount that was created in like the past 500 years combined. Like let's see, information.
What?
Yeah, like let me see if I can find like.
You could do so much with it. You could improve society so much.
Yeah, like how much data is created every day.
You could end hunger.
Yep. Oh yeah, here it is. This is from Forbes. Over the last 2 years alone, 90% of the data in the world was generated. So like of all the data in the world, 90% of that was created in the past 2 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean like, and how do we like, that's like, how do we like balance that out? Like how do we how do we avoid information overload in a lot of senses? And like to think that like, I mean, 20 to 30 years from now, how much data we're going to be creating?
Yeah.
Like, you know, how
Millions.
like how long is this how long is this going to continue to, I guess, exponentially grow? You know, is there going to be a limitation to it? Like, how do we? I mean, even like now we're creating information by doing this. So
that's what Sheldon Woolen talked about.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
About he didn't when he was alive. Sheldon Woolen, you should look him up. He's a great philosopher. Was of the 20th century. He explained how he wasn't so much a fan of the endless technological advancement of the United States, but rather I mentioned it before, the collective identity. That what do we stand for? We know that in the preamble of the Constitution, it says security is a big thing, right to bear arms, but there really is it's not talked about further about we the people. Do we mean helping everyone in this country, ending poverty, ensuring everyone can afford an education, that thinking as Americans we have a duty collectively to help each other out, other than having the right to bear arms.
Yeah. And here's some more like information like regarding like creation of data. Google processes 40,000 searches per second, and that's a total of 3.5 billion searches per day. And in like every minute of the day, users watch over 4 million YouTube videos.
Holy shit.
And daily, there's over 1.5 billion people active on Facebook.
Wow.
And 5 new profiles are created every second.
That's a lot of power.
Yeah.
To very few companies.
Yeah. And a lot of, and how they can regulate the type of information that's being shown, and how they can control what people think and how people like receive information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's surprising too is that in our politics, people aren't using a lot of the rhetoric that can help us understand the different, I guess, hegemonies, the different power structures that, back to Karl Marx, critical theory of understanding. In essence, what Karl Marx wrote about was the dynamics of power in a capitalist system. Mm-hmm. And thinking in using critical theory, a lot of our politicians running aren't really utilizing that. Even though Marx's outlook is still very valuable in understanding the capitalist system. Mm-hmm. And it's surprising that a lot of Democrats aren't using that. Why they're not using the language of the haves, the have-nots, because it could be very valuable, and that's what people want. And part of me just believes if Bernie says he's a democratic socialist, then just fuck it, go on TV tomorrow and say you're a socialist, run with it. Fucking run with it.
I don't know if he is though. I don't know if he would identify as that, but who knows. We're coming up on an hour now. Do you want to wrap this up? Or?
Yeah, I could.
Okay. Yeah, so there you have it. That is that edition. That, I guess, concludes this edition of Radio Sheridan. Thanks for joining us.